Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the Signatory. Today's webinar is Harnessing the Power of Email Marketing. My name is Kristen Hammett, and I will be serving as your webinar host today. I know we're having a little bit of a slow start this morning. People are starting to tune in. So as you tune in, take a look at that poll on your screen, just trying to get an idea of kind of maybe how frequently you email folks in your donor base as we dive into the power of email marketing today. If you have tuned into the Signatory webinars over the last few months, you know that I am the former Director of Development at a nonprofit for about 5 years. I have been in the chair that you guys are sitting in. I know what it is like to be in the middle of that nonprofit ministry development work. And I know full well that it's exciting, it's fun, it's tiring, overwhelming, hard work, and challenging. So I want to thank you for joining us today. I trust that the next hour of your time will be well spent gathering information from a subject matter expert. You've heard me say this before, and it is so true. What I love about the work that you guys are doing is you are sitting in a place where you get to see God's people connect to the work that He's doing. I'm pleased to join with Becky Robinson today, so I'd like to welcome her. Becky is an entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Weaving Influence, a digital marketing agency. She helps her clients show up online in the same powerful and compelling ways they show up in real life. She is a wife and a mom of 3 daughters and loves running, reading, and coffee. I wish I could get a show of hands to see how many of us could relate to that last one for sure. Today, she will help us understand how to better communicate with our donor base by leveraging email. Now, this is the first time that I have worked with someone who is not specifically in our nonprofit ministry fundraising corner of the world for these webinars. So I'm going to ask that those of you joining us really listen critically to the information that she's sharing during this presentation. She is an expert and very good in her field. So what I challenge you to do is listen to what she shares and try to discern, how does this apply specifically to you and to your ministry? How can you take what she has learned in her years of experience and use her expertise to leverage for your ministry growth? Before I hand this webinar over to Becky, let me review a couple of logistical details. I am going to add another poll here in just a moment as she begins her presentation. And so I ask that you not only chime into the current poll that's up, but another one, and it will be more specific to your email list. So be sure to answer that one. It will give Becky and I both an opportunity to gauge where you are in that email communication spectrum. Secondly, and as you've heard me say before, our goal is to make this presentation a conversation more than a presentation. Becky and I will be taking time to answer your questions. We'll be talking. As you have a question, please find that Q&A tab in the bottom toolbar. Type in your question as you have it. I will do my best to address that question with Becky, and we'll address those throughout the presentation as we go. We also plan to address questions at the end. However, if we don't get to all of your questions, we are capturing them and we will address them when the webinar concludes. If you are not satisfied that we have adequately answered your question, please just let me know. We want to get you the right answer, and we want to help you as much as we can. So when you get our follow-up email following the webinar, just shoot a message right back to me and ask that question again, or perhaps ask for a little bit more information, and we will certainly do our best to equip you with all the information that we can. Okay, I think that is it for the logistics piece. So welcome, Becky. We look forward to what you have to share with us this morning. And first, why don't you share just a little bit more about yourself as we jump into your good content?
Well, sure, I'm happy to share. And Kristen, I hope that we're going to see some of the results of that poll so that I can take those into account as I'm sharing my comments today. Kristen, you did call out that I have not specifically worked with nonprofits and ministries, which is absolutely true, but it might be helpful for some of your listeners to know that my husband and I spent the first 10 years of our life together in ministry. We planted a church, and we also were on the staff of Cru and raising support. And so this world is not completely foreign to me, and I'm aware for sure of some of the challenges that you may face in your organizations. And I'm really looking forward to, throughout today's call, to hearing more of your specific questions. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can share about me. I've been in business about 6 years, and what I have found by far in terms of what has worked for our clients, and our clients are a mixture of like leadership consultants and authors and then some nonprofit organizations, what we've found is that to get the best traction and action from people, email drives far more results than social media. So I'm hoping that as we talk today, you will be able to learn a few things that you can take away and implement in your organization even this week. So it looks like your second poll is up, Kristen, but I didn't see the results to the first one. Would you be willing to share some of the results with the attendees and me?
Yeah, absolutely. Just give me a second to logistically get over there. As I pull that up, I will share that momentarily.
Okay, super. So should I dive into the content while folks are finishing that second poll?
Yeah, I think so. That'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, sure. I'm happy to. So as we get started today, I want to kind of set the stage for you a little bit and give you an overview of the way that I view digital marketing efforts. And the most important thing that I would want to share is that your digital marketing strategy or your donor outreach strategy needs a center. And the most valuable center that you can create is your own website. And so I'm, obviously not knowing you, I don't know how well developed your website is, but the reason why your website is so important is because it's the only place that you own and control. So anyone who's used social media platforms as a place to build connections or awareness about your organization, you know that those social media channels are changing constantly. And you're probably aware of the way that your reach on a platform like Facebook, for example, is completely tied to what Facebook does with its algorithms. And many marketers have gotten frustrated in recent times about the fact that Facebook has become increasingly pay to play. So the best chance that you have of people really understanding the work that your organization is doing in the world, and the best way that you have for your donors to stay connected to what your organization is doing, is to have a vital, growing web presence on your own domain. So you'll notice in this graphic that there's a house at the center of the graphic, and that house represents your website. Right beside that house is the mailbox, and the mailbox is exceedingly important. We put that detail on this graphic for a reason, and the reason is because once you get people to your website, one of your key priorities is to convert them to your email list. Increasingly, what I found as I've done research about what's working in terms of driving results through digital marketing, email is still the most effective means that we have to connect with people and drive them to take a particular action. I read a study a couple of weeks ago that was done in which some researchers asked people how much money it might cost for them to give up certain connectedness online. And the one that people placed the highest value on was email, because very much in our society, we still live in our email inboxes, and we look to email as a great source of information. So this graphic really represents the fact that everything that you're doing with your marketing efforts to stay connected to your constituents will need to drive back to your website. And then once people get to your website, we want to see them converted to the email list. And Kristen is sharing with me some results from the first poll. In case you're curious, it looks like those of you who have answered the poll have said that your email frequency is either once a month or as needed. So thank you for that. I'm going to share with you just a little bit about the rest of this graphic before we move on to talking about email marketing. So outside of that inner circle where you see the website and the mailbox, you probably see the Twitter icon. So that second that second circle is related to social media platforms. And those social media platforms are the best place where you can find and form relationships. But you really want to make sure that any of the connections that you make on social media are driving people back to their own websites, to your own website. And it looks like Kristen has a quick question for me, so I will pause.
Yeah. Really, mine is more of a comment, and I'm just doing this really more for emphasis for those folks that are listening to you now, and for any who listened to our last webinar, this continues to be a consistent theme, and that is when we're communicating, we are always driving those donors back to our website. That is, if there's not another point of action, that getting them back to our website, and it sounds like you're saying the same for social media, is always our goal. And so I just think that bears reiterating and emphasizing that is where they're going to find more information about your organization. That's where they can donate. That's where they can find out how to get involved or learn how to contact you in a different way.
Yes, and one comment I would make about that, I'm sure there are varying levels of experience as it relates to understanding website metrics. But I would encourage anyone who's listening to mobilize someone on your team who can take a look behind the scenes at your website to see what pages on your website people are visiting, to see what type of content seems compelling, to see which of your tactics are bringing people to your website. So someone who understands Google Analytics, which provides metrics for websites, can tell you whether people are coming to your site from social media channels, or whether they're clicking through an email, or whether they know your domain and are typing that in directly to get to you. And that can give you some key insight about how to be more effective in keeping people on your website and engaging with your content longer. So thanks for that, Kristen. So moving on, let's talk a little bit more about how email marketing can add value to your organization. And the first thing that we want to do is walk through a few questions to consider. But before we do that, I want to make sure that we clarify really some basic things about email marketing. And depending upon your experience level, you may have heard the phrase permission-based email list. And in case you don't know, I am super happy to share with you a definition, although it looks like we have some results here that are coming up regarding email marketing experience. So I'm going to share those with you quickly. Most of you are using an email marketing tool like MailChimp or Constant Contact. A few of you do not and are using personal contacts. It looks like only about a third of the responders are sending a regular newsletter, and about a third of you are also brand new to the idea of email marketing. So again, there are no dumb questions, and we welcome really any questions that will help you move your organization forward as it relates to gaining effectiveness with email marketing. So quickly, to define a permission-based email list. This is something that a lot of our clients struggle with. To give you a little bit of context, we often work with people who have little to no experience with digital marketing, and they come to us because they're ready to launch a book and reach a wider audience with their work. So if you are also in that boat of not having had a lot of experience, you may feel that anyone who's emailed you in the past is giving you permission to email them. And while that's true, as it relates to one-at-a-time emails, when you want to send email marketing to a large list at once, there are certain regulations, different ones in other countries than in our country, but there are some guidelines that you want to be aware of. So the basic definition of a permission-based email list is that permission is verifiable consent to receive marketing communication. And people can give that consent in one of several ways. They could give that consent because they are filling out a form on your website. So if someone fills out a form, they are implicitly giving you permission to send them marketing communication. Now, meeting someone for a phone call for the first time is not giving verifiable consent to receive marketing communication. And there are many, many, many times that I meet someone out in the world and then suddenly I'm on their email list when I didn't visit their website and I didn't give them permission. If you're on this call, you have likely been added to people's email list in that way as well. Another kind of confusing point for some folks is LinkedIn contacts. I've had organizations and people with whom I've worked, and they say, well, you know, I have these email these connections on LinkedIn, and they assume that because someone connected with them on LinkedIn that they also have given consent to receive marketing communication. That is also not the case, and we'll talk a little bit about how to work around that if LinkedIn connections are important to you.
Becky,
yes.
Why is this permission piece so important? I think many of us, like you said, have had an experience where we meet somebody and exchange a business card or something like that, interchange, and all of a sudden we're getting emails. Why is it critical that we are getting that permission?
Well, so as you know, Kristen, our inboxes can become very noisy places, and we are most likely to engage with and take action on the email that we are requesting and giving permission to receive. So while you might think that having a big list is valuable, what's really more valuable is to have an engaged list. And if you are adding people to your list without their permission, what you're likely to do more than anything is make them a little bit frustrated or angry. And if someone is frustrated or angry, they are not likely to be the ones who are going to then insert a credit card and donate to our organizations. So having permission, you know, from a kind of common sense situation is you want to send people email who want to receive that email from you. You want them to be willing to open the email, and you want them to be willing to take action on the email. And the best way to ensure that those two things happen is to have their permission before sending email.
Great, thank you.
Sure thing. So related to permission-based email marketing, there are two sign-up methods that are available and valid. You can use a single opt-in where someone merely puts their name and email address into a form, and then you count that as permission, or you can also implement a double opt-in system. Now, depending upon what email marketing system you're using, there are different constraints that they have available. So you want to be aware of whatever system you're using and whether it requires a single opt-in or a double opt-in. Now, you can also get permission from people for email marketing if you're at an event, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. However, you want to make sure, for example, if you were to collect business cards at an event in order to add people to the list, you want to be explicit. If you would like to join our list, put your business card into this bucket and we will add you to our list. You want to be clear that if you're collecting, you know, email addresses on a list or in some other way, that people are understanding that they will hear from you with marketing communication in the future. So I hope that's clear and helpful. So if you want to ensure a healthy subscriber list, you want to secure permission before you send every time, and you want to never assume you have permission. And if you're in doubt, then you can get confirmation, and you can do that. You know, you could send an email to someone after you've met in person and have their business card, and you know, I could send an email to Kristen. I could say, hey, Kristen, it's Becky. I love doing the Signatory webinar with you. Would you like to receive our email newsletters? I'd love to stay in touch. And I could ask for her permission at that point. And if she gave me the permission at that time, I could go into my email marketing database and add her email address. I would not do it without asking her permission first. And chances are, typically, if Kristen were interested in my newsletter, she would go to my website and she would find the opt-in and get added in that way. And by giving that respectful approach, you can ensure that if people do sign up to receive your email marketing, that they want to hear from you and will be more engaged as a result. So let's talk about a few steps that you can take to enhance your email marketing. And looks like we've got the poll results popping up for me. So the first thing, for those of you who may not have begun or who think that you may have a way to enhance the list, you can organize the existing contacts that you have. Now, if you're talking about your own individual inbox, whether you're using Outlook or Gmail, you want to ask yourself, how current are your email contacts? So what will often happen with folks is when they have a massive initiative, maybe you have a fundraising campaign coming up and you want to ensure that you can reach as many people as possible with your content about that campaign. What some people might do is they might take the step of looking into their own email inboxes to see who's there, and there could be this temptation to go ahead and email all of them en masse. But you really want to think about how current are your email contacts. And one of the reasons behind that is in the event that you were to add any email contacts into an email marketing system, which I don't recommend, but if you were and you have a high level of those emails that are going to bounce, you are at risk for losing the functionality of your email marketing system. So you always want to ask how current are your. And one of the ways that you can keep your email list current is by emailing more frequently, because when you're emailing more frequently, then your email marketing system will get feedback of those bounces, and those can be cleaned out on a regular basis to ensure that you're able to continue to send and deliver mail. So that's the second question. How current is your existing permission-based list? And the best way really to keep that list current is to have a regular cadence of emailing, which we'll talk about later. You might want to ask yourself, when is the last time you sent email marketing? You know, if you haven't sent in a long time, you know, maybe it's been 6 months or a year since you've last sent to your email list, it's possible that people may forget that they have subscribed, and you may then be at risk for people marking your comments as spam. So you really want to think about how current is your list, and how can you keep a sustainable practice of staying in touch with people via email. Kristen, I'm going to pause before I go to the next slide. I do see that there are some questions coming in. I want to make sure there's nothing you want to bring yet.
Yeah, most of the ones that have come across have been logistical. However, I think that this might be, and maybe you're going to get into this more in your presentation, but I know that questions that often come up with development or communication or PR folks in nonprofit world is there a trick? Is there a formula to getting that email opened? Are you going to jump into that later, or is this a time to begin to kind of dissect that a little bit?
Sure. You know, I think that we'll get into that later, but if for some reason I forget to loop back to it, please ask me again. I did have a request to put this last slide up again, and it's fine with me for those who are watching. I'm happy to share the slides as a PDF as an ongoing resource to you. I don't know, Kristen, if that's your regular practice, but anyone can feel free to email me or Kristen, and I'm happy to share the slides.
Yeah, just to save that step, we will follow up this presentation with a follow-up email that will include the slides as well as a link to this presentation. So folks, if they want to come back around and listen to all of the content again and hear your comments and information, they're able to do that. So we will make that available to all those attending.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's talk a little bit about optimizing your website for capturing leads. So we talked at the beginning of the hour about the importance of having your website as the center of your digital marketing or donor outreach strategy. You want people to come to your website. And once people come to your website, the most important thing to do is to get them to be willing to give up their email address. And I have a little analogy that I like to use. Kristen made a joke at the beginning of the call about how I love coffee. In fact, I have a cup in front of me, but it's cold by now, which is very disappointing. And when I think about the way that we connect with people, if you meet and make connections on social media channels, for example, if you gain some followers on Twitter or connect with folks on Facebook, I liken that to meeting someone for coffee in a coffee shop because it's a fairly surface relationship. So meeting on social media is like, you know, meeting someone and saying hello in a coffee shop. When someone comes to your website, it's the same as if you invited them for dinner in your home. And those of us who are active in ministry, you know how wonderful it is to be hospitably welcomed into someone's home. So you really want to think about the people who are coming to your website are indicating a different level of commitment with you and your organization. And when you welcome them to your website, you really are like welcoming them as an honored guest at your dining room table. And what you're hoping is that they'll be open for another invitation after the first one. And so when people come to your website, what you really would love is for them to give you their email address so that you can stay in contact with them. And so what we recommend is that every site has an obvious opt-in, and in a perfect world, that opt-in would be on every single page of your website so that no matter what page someone is on, they can see how to stay in touch with with you. I'm going to pause my screen share for just a moment because what I'd like to do is to show you an example of an opt-in, and I'll be back with that in just a moment. Kristen, can you let me know, are you looking at my browser now?
I sure am. Yep, that works very
smooth. Perfect. All right, so here I am. I'm on the website of one of our clients, Susan Fowler, and you will notice that her opt-in is right here on the right-hand side of her blog page. And I want to call out a couple of things that may be covered in the slides later. So you may have been on websites before and it says subscribe. You know, how many of us need to subscribe to one more newsletter? What I love about the approach that Susan is taking here is she says, dig deeper, stay up to date with Susan's latest thinking and writing. And then she also gives you a chance to preview her newsletter so that, you know, if you're going to sign up, you get a taste of what that content might end up being. So as you're creating this opt-in and you want it to be very obvious, you'd like it to be near the top of your homepage, you'd like it to be on every page of your website, and the reason is because you want people to stay closely connected to you, and getting into their email inbox is the best way to do that. So as you consider how you can optimize your email marketing efforts, and I'm going to go back to that slide in just a second.
As you're doing that, Becky, let me just take a second and maybe interrupting you slightly, but every time we do these webinars, I feel this burden for you listeners. I know you're busy. I know you have a really long to-do list. And I sometimes think, gosh, what is the nugget that they can take from this? And I'm telling you right now, that's a simple nugget that everybody who's listening could do. So if your email or if your website still says subscribe, you're exactly right, Becky. I've seen that so many times. I don't need to subscribe to one more thing. Dig deeper is saying the same thing. It's just intriguing me to find out more, to learn more, to stay closer to this organization. So I think I would challenge, I think that's an easy takeaway for everybody. Figure out a way to really market that phrase, change it from subscribe, delete that off of your website, and change that to something that is really more of an invitation to get to know me better.
Yeah, I love that, Kristen. I definitely think this is an actionable tip. The other thing I would say is it's often helpful to give people an idea of how frequently they might hear from you. The common complaint that we hear and that I hear from clients a lot is, I don't want to sign up for someone's list because what if I get, 16 emails a week from them? And there are some marketers who email at that frequency. If your organization has settled on and has a reliable approach to email marketing, suppose you have a quarterly newsletter, you could craft that opt-in form to let people know right from the beginning, we will send you a quarterly update, or we will send you a monthly update. And that may be a way to help people overcome the resistance of sharing their email address and getting connected with you. So make sure that your website has an obvious opt-in. The second thing in optimizing your website is the one that we just covered, which is articulate the value people will get from being on your list. And as Kristen challenged you, really think about what is the phrase that you can use that's different from subscribe that will help people realize why they should open your email. You asked that question earlier. People will subscribe and will stay opted in to lists that they get some value from. And, maybe think about the emails that you will willingly and readily open. I have an email newsletter that comes to me on Sunday mornings by a digital marketer named Chris Brogan. He sends the email every single Sunday morning at the same time, typically before I'm even awake. And I know when I get up on Sundays, it will be there. He's as reliable as the sun, practically. And I open his emails because I always know that he's going to have a different perspective about marketing that will challenge me in my business. So think about your donor base and think about what would be valuable to them, what pain they might have in their lives or what passion they have around the ministry that your organization is doing, and make sure that when you're asking them to sign up for your email list, that they understand the value that they are going to get from you. Another note on this, think about the difference between receiving an email and you feel like it's coming from a friend who knows and cares about you versus kind of a corporate speak type newsletter. And one of the things that I would advise you is that the more authentic your email marketing can be to the heart and soul of your organization, the more willing people will be to receive those emails and open them. And we will talk about that a bit more later.
Becky, as you share that you get this regular Sunday email that you perceive as valuable, and it sounds like you read it on a consistent basis, is there, to that end, some day that is more optimal than another, or is it just consistency?
Well, I think that consistency is the most important part, and predictability, although my guess is that most of the folks on this call will not be able to send with a frequency where people will actually catch on to when the emails are being sent. So an example from our organization is that we send our email newsletter on a monthly basis. We send it on the first Thursday of every month. But I bet that the people receiving our email don't know that it comes on Thursday, and they don't know that it comes on the first Thursday of the month. That's more helpful for my team in terms of accountability, that we're going to get it out on a monthly basis. So as it relates to the people on this call, if you're not sending at a frequency that's weekly, it's probably not necessary to have a specific date, because your audience will not be alert to that. But you do want to think about the days and times that could be most valuable for your audience in receiving email. And some of that will come from experimentation. If you are able to take a look at open rates on your email, which, could be an advanced approach, or if you're able to look at, responsiveness to your emails, when are people responding? A small hack for that would be to include a call to action in your email. What I will often do is I'll say, hit reply and let me know XYZ. Typically, I'll try to ask something personal. Hit reply and let me know what you're doing this weekend, or hit reply and let me know how I can pray for you. And if you have something like that in the email, then you will have a subjective sense, if you receive replies, that people are actually tuned in to reading and engaging with your content.
So Becky, that actually triggered a question from a participant.
Sure.
Is it true that Tuesday mid-morning is better for an open rate?
I could not give you a definitive answer on that. We try to stay away from Monday morning emails in our organization. And this might sound counterintuitive, but I do have a weekly email that I send out that goes out on Friday afternoon, which you would think is not a great time for email marketing, but I get a lot of responses from people. And I actually crafted the email subject line to alert people. And the email subject line I use is learning for your weekend and a colon and whatever the email is about. And I get a ton of great response on that Friday afternoon email. I previously mentioned that this email that I receive and find value in comes on Sunday morning. And I really think a lot of it depends upon your audience. And so I can't really predict for your audience what will be the best, but I do advise that you stay away from Monday morning emails.
So Becky, just to kind of tag along with that comment and falls right in line with this question, for our listeners, I do think they're probably, especially in sharing something that requires some more reading, it's not a real brief, action-oriented, but maybe when you're sharing a story or a ministry update, I've heard both from our past webinar participants and experts, as well as sounds like what Becky is sharing, you can get some good results on that Friday and over the weekend when people maybe have a little bit more time and are willing to scroll through email on a Saturday morning with their coffee, where they may not be so willing to do that, certainly on a Monday morning when they're trying to get their week started. So at least it bears experimenting with for your organization.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. When you're dealing with volunteers and it's not a business-related initiative, and donors you could view as volunteers, it would be more likely that people would deal with those kind of side projects or interests in after hours. So sending evenings or weekends could be more effective for you. So going back to maximizing your website for capturing leads, one of the things that you can do, a tactic you can try, which might be requiring a bit more investment of time, is to create a lead magnet and supporting social media campaign to attract new signups. Once again, I'm going to pause my screen for a moment and take you over to my browser to show you an example of one of these landing pages that has been quite effective for one of our clients. So I'd be curious also if any of you on the call have been exposed to Bob Tiede and his work at Leading with Questions. So I want to call out a few things that you can notice about this landing page that I'm showcasing. This is a page on Bob's website, leadingwithquestions.com, and he's offering a number of free resources. Bob is a staff member with Crew, and his goal is to support leaders. And so he's created these free ebooks and audiobooks. They've been translated into various languages. And Bob has seen tremendous growth of his email list by offering these free resources. So if you want to try this route of creating a lead magnet, and the goal of a lead magnet is to get additional names and email addresses for your email list, you want to think about something that is relevant to the work that your organization is doing in the world, something that maybe already exists that you can package in a compelling way. And you want to think about adding value for those people who are constituents of your organization. Then the thing you want to do, and I'm going to help you notice, if you look at the very top of this web page, you'll notice that once you land on this web page, there is nowhere else to go on Bob's website. The only action that you can take from this page is to enter your first name and email address to access his resources. And so a landing page like this that is clearly focused on a singular call to action can be shared. It can be shared on social media channels. It could be advertised through a boost on Facebook. And once you get people to this page, the goal is to convert them to your email list and to provide value through that lead magnet that you're sharing. So I want to just quickly pause and see if anyone has questions about this idea. I'm sure that you've seen this before. People use lots of different types of downloads as lead magnets. And again, Bob Tiede, Leading with Questions, has gotten tremendous traction from this set of offers. Kristen, any questions before I go back to the slide deck?
No, I'm not seeing any questions come across, but I would tell you this is something for those development folks that are on the call. Be thinking about this lead magnet, and I may be the only one listening who hadn't really heard of this approach before, but I think this is a great way for you to continue to build relationships with those donors that are currently giving to your organization. This is a way to give something of value back. We talk about, giving a book or sharing something when you are indeed having coffee or lunch with a key donor. But this is a way maybe to give a broader reach to more of those donors. Ensure that you do have their most current email addresses, and maybe it's sharing a podcast or sharing a link to a sermon or a chapter from an ebook that you have that's relevant to your cause. I do think this is something that could not only help you capture and perhaps clean up your list and ensure it's quality information, but also give something of value to those folks that you are partnering with.
Sure, and one thing to keep in mind is if you have people who are really ready to move beyond just being a donor and want to become champions for or ambassadors for your organization, if you do have content like this that's of value and you make it easy for your donors to share with others, it could be that they have friends, family, colleagues with whom they could share this lead magnet, which would make others aware of your organization and really extend your reach. So if you want additional help on the idea of a lead magnet or how to create that, it should not be a huge time investment once you have the content identified. But very simply stated, you create a landing page like the one I showed you, and then there's mechanisms behind the scenes in your email marketing system where people would automatically get an email that's delivering that content to them. And I would encourage you to try out Bob's, or if you come across another offer like that on the web, sign up for one and see what type of communication you receive afterwards so you can get a sense of how it all works. So as we're talking about optimizing your website, I just called out here in the last bullet point that you want to use a landing page with one clear call to action. And as I showed you on my browser, that means taking off any other navigation on the page so that really there's only one action that people can take when they come to that page. So let's talk a little bit about utilizing events for capturing leads, because I'm sure that many of you have the opportunity at different times to be meeting up with people in person. And as we talked earlier, it's really important to make sure you have their permission before you email them. And so I have a few tips for using events for capturing leads. And one of the most basic ones is that you can always go old school and you can have a notepad and ask people to sign up. Make sure it's clear that if they write their email address on your notepad, that they're going to be added to your list. Make sure that you articulate the value that they're going to receive from the list. And you can do the same thing with collecting business cards, as long as you let people know that you're taking their card for the purpose of adding that email address to your list. And I'm sure that many of you have done this in the past. If you're at a trade show or other event where you are able to capture leads, quite often people will pair this idea with a giveaway. So maybe you have something of value that you're giving away and you're drawing from those business cards for the gift. Another possibility, if you're speaking at an event or showcased at an event, is to ask the organizers for access to their list of attendees. However, you need to make sure that it's clear that those attendees know that they're going to be added to your list. And so that might be something that requires conversation. A possibility around this would be if you do receive a list from an event organizers, but you don't have permission to email through your email marketing system, some of our clients will do a workaround, which is basically to send a blind copy email. So in your email client like Gmail, you would send an email to yourself from yourself. You would blind copy the distribution list, and you would just send a very simple, thanks so much. I loved meeting you at XYZ event. I hope my presentation was valuable. I would love to stay connected. And then at that point, you can link people back to your website and invite them to sign up. So you can send like a one-time email. The only possible drawback there, again, is spam complaints if the email list is not clean. So that might be kind of complicated, Kristen. Did that make sense?
I think it made sense. I just don't think that that is probably kind of back to your initial point of you want people opting in at the beginning, because that's where you're really going to get the biggest return on that communication. So I think it's one of those pieces for those folks that are out there that maybe are larger organizations that do have this interaction at events more. That might be something to try. But for our smaller organizations, I don't think this is where we focus.
Well, and so for those of you who might be from a smaller organization and you have the opportunity to speak, you can use the speaking platform, as long as the event organizers are open to it, to make that call from the stage. So as you're wrapping up your comments, you could say, our organization would love to stay in touch with you. Here are the types of things that we share through our emails. And at that point, you can invite people to visit your website as a follow-up to your speech. And that could be a means of staying connected. And at that point, the ones who do so are going to be the ones who are most interested in hearing from you. And here's another advanced tip. Many email marketing services like MailChimp have the opportunity to opt in by text. So if you are preparing a slide deck for a speech and you have some follow-up materials that you would like to share with people, you can invite them to opt in by sending a text during your presentation to a certain number. And you can have that automated to send them follow-up materials, and also then to funnel them into your ongoing email list. So again, this is an advanced approach, but if you're interested in maximizing an event, it's a valuable one to try if you want to experiment. So the last thing that you can do is send folks, and I need to go back one, send folks to an easy to remember landing page. So if your organization website is thesignatory.org, during your speech, you could put a URL to a landing page up on the screen and invite people to visit that landing page to download your content. And that's a really easy, quick way to help people stay more closely connected to you. So next, I want to talk about the importance of setting an established cadence for sending email updates. And I want to pause for just a moment to recognize that you likely have more on your to-do list than you could possibly do. You likely feel overwhelmed by the prospect of staying in touch via email. And when Kristen and I were talking and preparing for today's session, one of the things that I said to her is that it's far more important to create a sustainable cadence of email marketing where you make a commitment, like I said, for an example, to a quarterly newsletter and follow through for an entire year on a quarterly newsletter, and then increase as time allows. That's far better than, with a burst of caffeine and passion and energy, deciding that you're going to email weekly and then kind of fizzling out after 1 or 2 emails. So I encourage you to think realistically about what is sustainable for you in your organization and to create a sustainable schedule. Write it down, share it with your team, and whatever that sustainable schedule is that you feel like you can continue, then go forward to send and stay in touch with people. The second thing that I would say is that you can consider a common format to simplify and your content planning. It looks like I have a typo in my slide here. And so in our organization, when we were really struggling to get out a monthly newsletter, what we decided to do was to create a template that we would have a certain amount of content that would go into each newsletter, and there were certain sections that I would write, and then there were other sections that members of my team could write. So one thing to keep in mind is you want to do the things that only you can do, and as much as possible you want to delegate to others who can add value to other parts of the process. So it was important in my organization that each newsletter begin with a personal reflection from me. I'm the only one who can write those. But the other types of content that we were sharing about offers in our organization or events or highlighting books that we were marketing, anyone could write those parts. And so we used a Google Doc and we created a format, and on a monthly basis, I would pop in, do my section, and the team would take it from there. So think about a common format of content that you might send, and then also think about to whom you might delegate some parts that others could write and do. This is a really great tip. I love it. I would encourage you to sign up for other organizations' newsletters or other individuals' newsletters to see what you enjoy. There may be that you'll see a great idea about another organization and how they're sharing stories, or how they're calling people to donate, or however they're framing up what their organization is doing in the world. And you can get some great ideas by subscribing to others' newsletters and taking notes about what you like and what you don't like. The other thing that you can do is you can survey your list to find out what they really want to hear from you. Or you can take the subjective approach and do some experimentation and see what gets the best results for you. So one possibility is a formal survey when you ask people what they want to know, and another approach is to share some different things and see what gets the best open rates, or what gets the best click-through rates, or what people respond to most effectively. So I have an example for you on the subject of delegating. So this is a photo of a team that my team has worked with called Next Element. They are a leadership development organization based in Newton, Kansas. And one thing that's interesting about the Next Element team is that it's owned, and actually the ownership is shared by 6 partners, although only 5 are pictured here. You are not looking at me on camera at the current moment, but I am in the middle with the gray tank top, and the Next Element team is surrounding me. They are some really happy folks that are making a big difference in the world. And when I began coaching the Next Element team, they already had a cadence in place of a weekly email. But that weekly email was always sent by their CEO, Nate, who's on the far right in this photo. And one of the things that I encouraged them to do for a number of reasons was to share the leadership responsibility of writing that weekly email. And so soon after we began to work together, they started a rotation where every 6th week, one of the owners of their organization would be responsible for sending that weekly email with a personal reflection. And what I've noticed is that their email is so engaging because each week you get to know another owner of their team in a different way. Each owner will share experiences from their life that relate to the work that they're doing in the world. And so not only are they sharing valuable content, but they're also helping the people on their list to get connected to all the various members of their team. It's exceedingly powerful. So if you're curious, you can go to next-element.com and sign up for their newsletter and get to know Sandy and Aaron and Jamie and Julie and Rob and Nate. And, I can rattle off their names not only because they're my clients, but also because they've been in my email inbox in a relevant way. sharing content that's of extreme value. And so if you are feeling overwhelmed in your organization, I would encourage you to consider in what ways you might delegate or share the leadership of sharing the stories of your organization.
Becky, I'd like to pause here for just a minute. I think this is really powerful. I know this is a mistake I made several years ago in development, feeling like either the CEO or I needed to be the voice behind all of that communication. And I think there's a lot of strength in what you just said, letting that relationship go beyond just that top person or the top two folks, but instead to be made with other voices within the organization. So I think that's a really practical step for folks as well. A couple of little detail or logistical pieces that I have questions about are, how important is it that come from the same email address every time? Is that relevant with regard to getting that open rate or it not falling into junk mail? Does it still need to come from that CEO or development director?
You know, that's a really great question, Kristen. And I think that it might be different for every organization. So with Next Element, and we're still looking at their smiling faces, they actually send from their own email addresses. And I think there can be some value in getting people to recognize multiple email addresses. What I would say is don't send from info@. Please have a name associated with the email that's sending the marketing. People connect to people. I don't want to receive emails from info@. You know, I would far rather, you know, get an email from Bob. So I would strongly encourage, even if there are different people contributing to the email, that there be a designated sender or senders, and that any of those email addresses are coming out from an email address that has someone's name on it. So I hope that answers your question. You know, one of the things that I say all the time, and I'll say it again, is like the magic happens when you show up. And there are a couple of things there. So showing up is important. You know, the more often you can be in people's inboxes, the more memorable you will become. And it's important for whatever arrives in people's email inboxes to be authentic and compelling. And the more kind of personal or genuine or authentic or real it is, the more people are going to respond to it. So they really want to feel like they're receiving something meaningful that matters, and not only receiving marketing communication or a newsletter update. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. Folks, as you're listening, we're getting kind of to that last 10 minutes or so. If you have some questions, please chime in. I know that Becky has more information, but we want to make sure that we're getting your questions answered as well. So we're going to wrap up here in the next 3 to 4 minutes, have some question and answer time still remaining on the other side of this presentation. So.
Sure. So do you think, Kristen, we have time to go through this last slide, or do we want to go to questions first?
No, I think we're good. As we get some questions come across, we may pause.
Okay, no problem. So I have a few advanced approaches for you, and one of them is related to metrics. I mentioned a couple of times on the call that you want to really take a look at the effectiveness of your email sends, and your tools like MailChimp or Constant Contact can give you metrics that can help you get a better idea of, you know, how well your emails are performing. You know, you want to think about things like subject lines. And Kristen, I know as we were preparing for this event, we talked about, you know, what if you need to drive immediate action? Is it okay to use the word urgent in a subject line? And my opinion is absolutely yes. If you can use the word urgent sparingly, it can get people's attention and drive more immediate action. An example of this would be that we do webinars in my organization as well, and I will often send a last-minute email, and I'll put that in the subject line, last minute sign up for today's webinar. Chances are people are going to take action on that email more quickly than other emails that fall in their inbox. You can also experiment with what type of subject lines work better for your audience. I do not recommend a subject line like May newsletter or June newsletter. Instead, if you can pull out something interesting from the email to serve as the subject line, people are probably going to be more likely to open it. If I see May newsletter, I am likely to think, I don't have time for that right now. But if I see something that says, you know, exciting, I don't know, I'm not thinking on my feet well, but something that pulls out what's interesting in the email, I'm going to be far more likely to open it. You know, you want to experiment with which days work best for your organization to send, and also which times work best. Now, this is a super advanced tip. You could consider some campaigns to nurture your contacts. So one of the things that we do in our organization is that once people sign up for a certain list, we might have a series of emails that we call an autoresponder, which basically means once someone is put into this email campaign, they're going to get emails at set intervals. So if you are trying to help people get to know all the work that your organization does in the world, what you can do is set up a sequence that really helps people get a vision for the work you're doing in the world, and maybe you set up those emails to go out, you know, once every 2 weeks for the first 3 months, and then by the end of the 3 months, people will have a much deeper connection and view of what your organization is doing. Now, that takes some work on the front end to get that content created, but it could really increase effectiveness of your work overall. So if you're ready to dig deeper on email marketing, you could consider creating what we call autoresponder campaigns. The last thing that you can consider is how you can sort your list. It may be that you have different types of people with different engagement levels who are opted into your list, and if you're able to tag them based on certain actions that they take, or certain resources that they download, or certain events that they volunteer for, or maybe even their level of commitment as it relates to donations, then you may be able to send more relevant information, or you may decide that you can send certain lists content on a more frequent basis. So again, this is an advanced approach, but it deals with really understanding the different people who are represented on your list, and potentially the different types of communication and frequency that you might be able to send to them. So there's a few advanced tips.
Yeah, I think those are good advanced tips, or just kind of tricks of the trade, Becky. I know that one thing I want to pull out that you mentioned to me when we talked, kind of preparing for this, was urgent is okay if it is urgent. So just as a reminder, folks, people will respond to an urgent subject line if, when they open it, it is urgent. If you tease them with that line, then the integrity is lost, and they may not open the next several emails that you send. So I think that's good. I think the other piece that you just talked about with this campaign to nurture is echoing what we heard last month, from another expert, in really an email strategy based on interest, maybe a welcome series, a new donor series, and you're basically saying the same thing. So where you can take some time and invest maybe a 3-part or 4-part email series to go out on a regular basis to those folks who are new to your list, I think that probably is worth the investment, so they do, like you said, get to know your organization a little bit better.
Yes, I definitely recommend that. And, you know, once you set them up, you want to potentially set a reminder to yourself, whether it's yearly or less frequently than that, to make sure that the content is still relevant. You know, I think what has happened for us in our organization is that we create campaigns and then we forget about them. And we realize later, oh, you know, this isn't really anything we're doing anymore. And so you want to think about that as well. If you have any type of automated campaigns, that you also have a reminder system for your team to make sure that you keep those up to date with any changes to your organization.
Becky, we're going to have to kind of wrap it up here in the next 30 seconds or so, and then I have a question that's been lingering that I want to make sure we get answered as well. So I'll let you close up and ask this question.
Sure. Well, so my website, weavinginfluence.com, has a number of free ebooks that may help you in your digital marketing efforts, and we wanted to showcase one of those today. I have a resource called 6 Tips for Training for LinkedIn Success, and it's free. It's a lead magnet where you need to give me your email address, and then I will deliver this ebook to you. And one thing that you'll notice if you sign up to receive the ebook is that there is a campaign that you'll receive of a few emails, and then you'll probably be added to our nurture list, which gets a number of emails throughout the month. So if you're interested in getting a bird's eye view into how our organization is using some email marketing, and if you're interested in the content Training for LinkedIn Success, I would encourage you to download the ebook. You can also contact me via email. I am Becky@weavinginfluence.com, or send me a LinkedIn request. I would love to connect with you after this event if my team or I could be of any value in helping you be successful with your email marketing.
That's great. So Becky, before we close this off, thanks for sharing that. But here's the lingering question: and it circles back kind of to the beginning about the how current is your list, and making sure that we have a pretty clean, or as clean as we can, email list. Is it wise or unwise to send out an email to your entire list that essentially says, do you want to keep getting communication from us? Do you still want to hear from us? Is that a good idea, or is it a bad idea to let so many folks kind of have an easy out to get off your list?
Yeah, it's not really my favorite approach, Kristen. I know that with some recent GDPR compliance issues, if people are aware of that, there's been a lot of talk about that online. It's a European Union regulation that a lot of organizations have had to work to comply with. I've gotten a lot of emails like that. It's not my favorite approach, because most folks know that at the bottom of any email marketing, there's a mandatory unsubscribe link. So, and one of the problems of asking people to sign up again is if they happen to miss that email, they maybe want to still receive your messages, but they just didn't open that one. And so you're missing the opportunity to stay in touch with them. So it wouldn't be my favorite approach. I would not advise it.
I think that's a very fair answer, and I think that's helpful for folks who might be wondering exactly that. If my list is really out of date, do I give folks this out or not? So I think that's very helpful. Hey, thank you, Becky. This was great information. I think it was very applicable really to our small organizations as well as large organizations. Somebody has something to take away from this. I think everybody can learn something. I think that, like I said earlier, that even just changing subscribe on your website to something that's a little bit more engaging could be an easy action step for everyone. We are running close on time, folks, so I'm going to give just a quick announcement. I want to make sure that everyone marks their calendars for July 24th at 1 o'clock. That will be our next webinar. We are moving the webinar back a week and to a different time. We did a survey to better understand what you guys are looking for, and our first takeaway was logistical. You wanted some flexibility and timing, so we are adjusting. So mark your calendars, Tuesday, July 24th, 1 o'clock Central Time. You will be receiving an email invitation about that as well. We're going to be visiting with John Levy with Ministry Thrive, and he's going to be talking about year-end giving strategies. Yes, you heard me right. We will be talking about year-end giving in July. As you may be aware, tax laws have changed, and it will likely have an impact on your year-end giving. And we want to make sure that you're thinking now about how you're going to communicate with your ministry partners, not only in November and December, but from now until then, to ensure your giving remains on track to match with your budget. Okay, I think that closes our time. Becky, thank you again. You have added some great value. And for those of you who have tuned in, just be encouraged. I know that this is a lot of information that we went through. Again, just kind of think back, look back over your notes. What are 2 things that you can do in your organization over the course of the next couple of weeks? What can you implement? What takeaway really is going to have the biggest benefit for your organization? Remember that you are all doing good work. Wherever you find yourself in this gamut of email communication, God has called you for the work that you're doing. You have the privilege of being the connection point for His resources and His work. Continue to make a plan, follow your plan, pray a lot, and watch Him bless your ministry. I hope you have time to join us on July 24th as we talk about year-end giving. And until then, God bless your work, your efforts, and your donor communication. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.